January 28, 2023. 2:30 a.m. Three women sit in a car outside a Beverly Hills mansion. Music still pounding from inside. Laughter echoing down the hillside. The glow of the city sprawled beneath them like a sea of stars. They have no idea. They have 30 seconds to live. Los Angeles, a city that promises everything. Fame, fortune, a chance to rewrite your story. But sometimes, those promises come with a price. And on this night, in the exclusive hills of Beverly Crest, that price would be paid in blood. Ayanna Hutton, 33 years old. An aspiring rapper from Chicago with dreams bigger than the skyline. Destiny Sims, 26 years old. A hairstylist. A mother of three. A woman who came to support a friend. Nena Davis, 29 years old. A loyal sister who showed up because that's what love does. They traveled from the Midwest to Los Angeles for one reason, to celebrate. An album release party, a night of music, friendship, and success. But celebration turned to massacre. Before the sun could rise, all three women would be dead, shot multiple times, left slumped in a vehicle parked just outside the mansion gates. Over 30 rounds fired, 7 people hit, 3 lives extinguished. This wasn't random. This wasn't a robbery. This was an ambush. Who were these women? Why were they targeted? And who would orchestrate such a cold-blooded execution at a party meant for joy? This is the story of the Beverly Crest triple murder. A tragedy that shook 2 cities. A case that exposed the deadly reach of gang violence. And a reminder that even in paradise, evil can find you. But before we dive into this heartbreaking story, I need to ask you something. If cases like this matter to you, if you believe in honoring victims by telling their truth and demanding justice, then please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story that deserves to be told, and share this video. Because the more people who know Ayanna's name, Destiny's name, and Nena's name, the more their legacies live on. Now, let's uncover what really happened that night. Beverly Crest, a name that whispers wealth, power, and exclusivity. Nestled high in the Santa Monica Mountains, just north of Beverly Hills, this is where Los Angeles keeps its most expensive secrets. Multi-million-dollar estates. Gated driveways, infinity pools that seem to spill into the city below. It's the kind of place where Hollywood executives, tech moguls, and celebrities retreat from the world, where privacy is currency and neighbors are separated by acres of manicured hillside. But in recent years, Beverly Crest has become something else too, a playground for short-term rentals. Luxury mansions transformed into weekend party venues, rented out on apps for music video shoots, album release parties, influencer gatherings, places where strangers with money can live like kings for a night. The mansion on Ellison Drive was one of these properties. Glass walls, modern architecture, a private pool glowing turquoise in the darkness. From the outside, it looked like paradise. But on the night of January 28, 2023, it became a killing ground. Because when you mix luxury with anonymity, celebration with secrecy, sometimes the wrong people walk through the door, and sometimes they bring violence with them. But before we talk about what happened in that mansion, we need to talk about the 3 women who never made it inside. Because Ayanna, Destiny, and Nena weren't just victims of a crime. They were daughters, mothers, dreamers, and their stories deserve to be told. 3 women, 3 mothers, 3 friends chasing joy in a city that promises dreams, but often delivers tragedy. Let me tell you who they really were. Ayanna Hutton, 33 years old, from the streets of Chicago. If you knew Ayanna, you knew her energy before you knew her name. She had that kind of presence, magnetic, impossible to ignore. The kind of woman who walked into a room and made it hers. She was a rapper, an artist. Not famous yet, but hungry, determined. She'd just released new music on Apple Music, pouring her soul into every verse, every beat. This wasn't a hobby for Ayanna. This was her escape, her purpose, her future. But more than the music, Ayanna was spiritual. She believed in divine timing, in being authentically anointed, as she'd say. She'd post on social media about staying focused when people doubted you, about trusting God's plan even when the path wasn't clear. You know you're authentically anointed when people who got more than you don't like you, she once said, and you're trying to figure out why you're attacking me when I ain't got nothing. Ayanna didn't just want success. She needed it, not for the glamour, but to prove to herself, to her family, to everyone who ever counted her out, that she was meant for something greater. She had dreams that stretched far beyond the south side of Chicago. And on that cold January night, she was in Los Angeles to see one of those dreams come true. Destiny Sims, 26 years old, a mother of 3, a hairstylist with hands that could turn a vision into art. Destiny was originally from Chicago, but she'd made a life for herself in Buckeye, Arizona. She was known for her creativity, her bold style, her ability to make anyone feel beautiful. Her clients weren't just clients, they were family. She'd listen to their problems while braiding their hair, offer advice while curling their edges. That's who Destiny was, a nurturer, a giver. But beyond the salon, Destiny's whole world revolved around her 3 children. Everything she did, every dollar she made, every late night she worked, it was for them, to give them a better life, to show them what love looked like. Her friends described her as someone with an infectious energy, the kind of person who made you laugh without trying, who made you feel seen. Destiny didn't come to Los Angeles chasing fame. She came to support a friend, to celebrate, to feel alive. She had no idea she'd never make it home to her babies. Nena Davis, 29 years old, known to her closest friends as Nina. Nena grew up with Ayanna. They were more than friends, they were sisters. The kind of bond that doesn't break, no matter the distance or the years. Nena was from Bolingbrook, Illinois, and she was the definition of a devoted mother. You'd find her on the sidelines of her children's games, cheering louder than anyone else. She was active in her community, always showing up, always helping, always present. But life hadn't been easy for Nena lately. Just months before this trip, she'd lost her father. The pain was still raw, the grief still heavy, and yet she was here in Los Angeles because Ayanna needed her, because that's what sisters do. Nena was caring, generous, the kind of person who would drop everything to be there for someone she loved. And on January 28, 2023, love brought her to Beverly Crest. It also brought her to her death. 3 women, 3 mothers, 3 souls full of hope, ambition, and love. They didn't come to Los Angeles looking for trouble. They came for music, for friendship, for one night of celebration in a city that sells dreams by the hour. But what they walked into was a nightmare. The night started like so many others in LA. Music, laughter, flashing lights, and social media posts. But as the hours crept toward dawn, celebration would turn to chaos, and joy would be drowned in gunfire. January 27, 2023. Evening. Los Angeles was alive with possibility. The kind of night where anything felt achievable, where dreams felt close enough to touch. For Ayanna, Destiny, and Nena, this wasn't just another night out. This was the night. A celebration. An album release party for a rapper from their circle back in Chicago. Someone who'd made it. Someone who was living proof that the dream was real, and they'd flown all the way from the Midwest to be part of it. The energy was electric. A group of friends, some from Chicago, some from other cities, all gathered in Los Angeles for this moment. People who'd grown up together, who'd struggled together, who understood what it meant to finally see one of their own succeed. They went bowling earlier that evening. Laughing, taking pictures, living in the moment. Social media was flooded with their joy, smiling faces, group photos, captions about loyalty, about making it out, about celebrating wins together. We made it. Real ones only. Chicago to LA. The party was being held at a luxury short-term rental in Beverly Crest, the kind of mansion you see in music videos. Glass walls, a glowing pool, views that stretched across the city like a kingdom beneath your feet. When they arrived, the vibe was everything they'd hoped for. Music thumping through expensive speakers, bottles popping, people dancing, networking, celebrating life. For Ayanna, this wasn't just a party, this was validation. Proof that her music, her grind, her faith, it was all leading somewhere. For Destiny, it was a rare night away from the responsibilities of motherhood. A chance to breathe, to feel young, to remember who she was before the world made her a caretaker. For Nena, it was about being there for her sister, about showing up, about love. But as the night wore on, something shifted. Parties like this, they attract attention, not all of it good. In a city like Los Angeles, where power, money, and ego collide, luxury doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes it's a trap. A stage set for people with hidden motives, hidden vendettas. And on this night in this mansion, not everyone came to celebrate. Some came with a different purpose. Around 2:30 in the morning, as the party began to wind down, Ayanna, Destiny, and Nena walked outside. Maybe they were leaving. Maybe they were getting something from the car. Maybe they just needed air. We'll never know for sure. What we do know is this. They stepped into the California night. Cool air, quiet streets, the city lights sprawling beneath them like a blanket of stars. They climbed into a vehicle parked just outside the mansion on Ellison Drive. And then, silence shattered. Gunfire, not one shot, not two, a barrage. Over 30 rounds fired in rapid succession. The sound echoing through the hillside like thunder. Neighbors would later describe it as machine gun fire. Relentless, brutal, calculated. The women didn't have time to run, didn't have time to scream, didn't have time to process what was happening. In seconds, it was over. 3 bodies, motionless. Inside the car, 4 others injured, 2 critically, blood on the seats, shell casings scattered across the pavement, the smell of gunpowder hanging in the cold air. The celebration was over. By the time the first 911 call came through, the shooters were already gone. Vanished into the Los Angeles night like ghosts, and 3 mothers would never go home again. Within minutes, Beverly Crest was flooded with red and blue lights, sirens wailing, officers rushing to the scene. But what they found was a nightmare they weren't prepared for. 2:30 a.m., multiple 911 calls flood the Los Angeles Police Department. Shots fired, Beverly Crest, Ellison Drive. People are down. Oh my God, people are down. It sounds like a machine gun. Please, send help. Officers from the West LA Division respond immediately. Sirens screaming through the quiet hillside, racing toward a neighborhood where violence like this isn't supposed to happen. When they arrive at the 2700 block of Ellison Drive, the scene is chaos. People running, screaming, Some injured, stumbling, trying to get away. Others frozen in shock, unable to process what just happened. And then they see the car, parked just outside the mansion. Engine off. Doors closed. Inside, 3 women, slumped, motionless. Blood everywhere. Ayanna Hutton, Destiny Sims, Nena Davis, all 3 gone. The officers call for backup, for paramedics, for the coroner, but there's nothing anyone can do. The women were dead before help could arrive. Dead before they even knew what was coming. As the Los Angeles Fire Department arrives, they find 4 other victims. 3 men, 1 woman, all suffering from gunshot wounds. 2 of them are in critical condition, fighting for their lives. In total, 7 people were shot. More than 30 shell casings are recovered from the scene, scattered across the street like evidence of a war zone. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This wasn't a fight that escalated. This was an ambush. Surgical, coordinated, ruthless. Someone had planned this. Someone had waited. And when the moment came, they unleashed hell. Detective Megan Aguilar from the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division arrives shortly after. She's seen crime scenes before. Too many, but this one hits different. 3 young women, mothers, dreamers, cut down in the prime of their lives, no weapons found on them, no indication they were involved in anything criminal, just victims, wrong place, wrong time, or worse, targeted. As the sun begins to rise over Beverly Crest, the mansion is now a crime scene. Yellow tape flutters in the morning breeze. News helicopters circle overhead. Neighbors peek through curtains, terrified and confused. One resident would later tell reporters, "It makes me very sad and scared. I didn't know if I should even walk my dog this morning." Another said, "Those girls were my age. I could have been at that party too. It's just so sad." This was supposed to be a safe neighborhood, a place where million-dollar homes kept trouble out. But on January 28, 2023, trouble walked right through the front door. By mid-morning, the bodies are removed, the families are notified, and in Chicago, in Arizona, in Illinois, phones start ringing. Mothers, fathers, children, all about to receive the worst news of their lives. Ayanna's father, Keith Hutton, would later post on social media, "My baby girl is gone. I can't believe this is real." Destiny's mother, heartbroken and furious, would say, "I'm ecstatic that they caught the demons. I refer to them as demons because that's what they are. Just awful that our daughters were caught up in this senseless killing." Nena's family, still mourning the loss of her father just months before, now had to bury a daughter, a mother, a sister, 3 families, shattered, 3 sets of children, without their mothers, and one burning question that no one could answer yet. Who did this? The LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division wasted no time. This wasn't just a murder investigation, this was a hunt. And as detectives began piecing together the clues, a disturbing picture started to emerge. The morning after the shooting, the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division took full control of the investigation. This was no longer just a local crime. This was a triple homicide in one of Los Angeles' most exclusive neighborhoods, the kind of case that demanded answers. Fast. Detective Megan Aguilar led the charge. Her team immediately began combing through the scene. Shell casings, bullet trajectories, blood spatter patterns, surveillance footage from the mansion and neighboring properties. Every detail mattered. Because whoever did this didn't leave much behind. The initial theory? A robbery gone wrong. Maybe someone at the party saw an opportunity, saw expensive jewelry, designer bags, cash, and decided to take it by force. But as detectives dug deeper, that theory started to crumble. Nothing was stolen from the victims. Their belongings were still in the car, phones, purses untouched. This wasn't about money. Then came the second theory, gang activity. The LAPD learned that several people at the party had ties to gangs back in Chicago. Not everyone, but enough to raise red flags. And when you mix gang affiliations with alcohol, ego, and old grudges, violence can erupt in an instant. But even that didn't fully explain what happened, because this wasn't a spontaneous fight. This wasn't a heated argument that escalated into gunfire. This was calculated. Detective Aguilar would later describe it in chilling terms. The suspects used ambush-style tactics on their unsuspecting victims. Planning and coordination was utilized to carry out these attacks. Ambush-style. That word sent a shiver through the investigation. It meant the shooters didn't just show up and start firing. They waited. They planned. They knew exactly when and where to strike. This was an execution. But if the women were targeted, why? Ayana, Destiny, and Nena weren't gang members. They weren't involved in any criminal activity. They were mothers, artists, friends. So why were they gunned down like enemies? The answer, investigators suspected, was darker than anyone wanted to admit. They may not have been the intended targets. They may have simply been in the way. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation stalled. No arrests, no concrete suspects, just theories and dead ends. The community grew frustrated, angry. Families of the victims began speaking out, demanding justice. Destiny's mother, grief-stricken and desperate, pleaded with the public, "If anyone knows anything, please come forward. My daughter didn't deserve this." None of them did. The LAPD offered a $5,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. Tips started coming in, some credible, most not. Detectives chased every lead, interviewed witnesses, analyzed phone records, tracked social media activity from the night of the party, but the shooters had vanished. Meanwhile, the mansion on Ellison Drive sat empty, a reminder of the horror that unfolded there. Neighbors avoided it. The owners stopped renting it out. It became a ghost in the hills, a place haunted not by spirits, but by unanswered questions. Who pulled the trigger? Why did they do it? And would they ever be caught? Then, in late April 2023, something shifted. A tip, a name, a connection. Detectives working the case noticed something unusual, a pattern. The Beverly Crest shooting wasn't the only violent incident involving people from Chicago and Los Angeles that winter. Just 2 months earlier, in December 2022, a man had been shot and killed in North Hollywood. The circumstances were eerily similar. Ambush style, calculated, gang-related. And when investigators started digging into that case, they found a link. A name that appeared in both investigations. Dejon Tompkins. Suddenly, the pieces started falling into place. This wasn't just about one night, one party, one act of violence. This was about a network, a vendetta, a war being fought across state lines, and the LAPD was closing in. On May 12, 2023, the LAPD held a press conference. 3 men had been arrested in connection with the Beverly Crest triple murder. All of them from Chicago, and the hunt was finally over. May 12, 2023. Nearly 4 months after the murders, the LAPD called a press conference. Reporters gathered, cameras rolled. And for the first time since that horrific January night, there was hope. Detective Megan Aguilar stepped to the podium. Today, we are announcing the arrest of 3 individuals in connection with the Beverly Crest triple homicide. The room fell silent. 28-year-old Dejon Tompkins, 23-year-old Dante Williams, and 28-year-old Derry Stanford. 3 names, 3 men, all from Chicago. The families of the victims, watching from home, felt a wave of emotion they couldn't quite describe. Relief, rage, grief, all at once. Finally, answers were coming. The arrests didn't happen all at once. Dejon Tompkins was taken into custody first on April 10th in Chicago. Weeks later, Dante Williams was apprehended in Gary, Indiana, but not without a fight. He'd been evading arrest, moving from place to place, trying to stay one step ahead of the law. But you can't run forever. The third suspect, Derry Stanford, was captured in New York on May 10th. 3 cities, 3 arrests, one coordinated effort to bring justice for Ayanna, Destiny, and Nenna, but the charges, they were staggering. Each of the 3 men was charged with 3 counts of murder, 6 counts of attempted murder for the 4 survivors who were shot that night, 6 counts of assault with a semi-automatic firearm, and the most chilling detail? Special circumstances allegations, lying in wait, multiple murders. In California, those words carry weight. They mean one thing: life in prison without the possibility of parole. But Dejon Tompkins faced even more: a 4th murder charge. Back in December 2022, 2 months before the Beverly Crest massacre, a man had been shot and killed in North Hollywood. The LAPD had connected Tompkins to that homicide as well. This wasn't a one-time act of violence. This was a pattern, a trail of bodies stretching from Chicago to Los Angeles. And investigators began to piece together the bigger picture. All 3 suspects were described by authorities as gang-affiliated, not just casual members, active participants in a violent network that stretched across state lines. The Beverly Crest shooting, investigators believed, was part of a deeper conflict, a retaliation, a message. But the exact motive? That remained murky. Some speculated it was tied to rivalries back in Chicago, old grudges that followed people to Los Angeles. Others believed it was about respect, power, territory, whatever the reason. Ayanna, Destiny, and Nenna paid the price. As the 3 suspects were extradited back to Los Angeles, they each faced the reality of what awaited them: a trial, evidence, witnesses, and 3 families demanding justice. Destiny's mother, speaking to reporters after the arrests, didn't hold back. "I'm ecstatic that they caught the demons. I refer to them as demons because that's what they are." Her voice cracked with emotion. "Just awful that our daughters were caught up in this senseless killing." Ayanna's father posted a tribute online, thanking law enforcement but making it clear: this doesn't bring her back, but at least they'll pay. Nenna's family stayed quieter, but their pain was no less real. They'd already lost her father. Now they'd lost her too. And for what? The arrests brought a sense of closure, but not peace, because even with suspects in custody, even with charges filed, nothing could undo what happened. 3 women were still gone. 3 sets of children would still grow up without their mothers. And a city built on dreams was reminded once again how fragile those dreams can be. The legal system would now take its course, but behind the headlines and the courtroom drama were real people: mothers grieving daughters, children asking where mommy went, friends replaying that night over and over, wondering if there was anything they could have done differently. This is where the story becomes more than a crime. This is where it becomes heartbreak. Behind every headline, behind every mugshot, behind every court date, there are people left behind. People who wake up every morning and reach for a phone to call someone who will never answer. People who set the table and realize there's one seat that will forever be empty. People who hear a song, see a photo, smell a perfume, and are suddenly drowning in memories. This is the part of the story that doesn't make the evening news. This is grief. Destiny's mother speaks with a voice that trembles between rage and sorrow. Her daughter, her baby, is gone. And now she's left raising Destiny's 3 children. Children who ask questions she doesn't know how to answer. Where's Mommy? When is she coming home? How do you tell a child that their mother isn't coming home? That she was taken by violence they're too young to understand? Destiny wasn't just a hairstylist. She wasn't just a friend. She was a protector, a nurturer, a woman who worked late nights so her kids could have better mornings. And now, those kids have to grow up without her. My daughter didn't deserve this, her mother says, tears streaming. None of them did. Keith Hutton, Ayanna's father, carries a different kind of pain. The pain of a parent who believed in their child's dreams. Ayanna was on the verge of something. He could feel it. She was finally getting traction with her music. Finally seeing doors open. And he was so proud. Every call, every text, every new song release. He was there, cheering her on. But now, silence. He posted a heartbreaking tribute online after her death. Words that captured a father's love and a father's loss. My baby girl is gone, he wrote. I can't believe this is real. He didn't just lose a daughter. He lost a dreamer, a fighter, someone who believed in divine timing and authentic purpose. And now, that purpose will never be fulfilled. Nena's family carries a grief that feels impossibly heavy. Just months before the shooting, they'd buried Nena's father. They were still mourning, still trying to find their footing, still learning how to live with that absence. And then, Nena was taken too, a daughter, a mother, a sister, gone in a flash of gunfire she never saw coming. Her children, already dealing with the loss of their grandfather, now have to face life without their mother. How does a family survive that kind of loss? Twice in 1 year? Friends describe Nena as the glue, the one who held people together, the one who showed up no matter what. And now, there's a hole that can never be filled. But it's not just the immediate families who are grieving. Friends, classmates, clients, community members, people who knew these women, even briefly, felt the ripple of their absence. Destiny's clients mourned the loss of someone who made them feel beautiful. Ayanna's friends mourned the loss of someone who inspired them to chase their own dreams. Nena's neighbors mourned the loss of someone who always showed up with a smile. These weren't just victims, they were pillars, lights, forces of love in a world that often feels dark. In the months following the arrests, memorials were held. Candles were lit. Flowers were laid. Balloons were released into the sky. Friends gathered to share stories, to laugh through tears, to remember the joy these women brought into the world. But beneath it all was a question no one wanted to ask out loud. Why them? Why did 3 women who came to Los Angeles with nothing but hope and celebration in their hearts end up dead in a car? Why did violence find them when they were just trying to live? The families have vowed to keep fighting. Fighting for justice. Fighting to make sure Ayanna, Destiny, and Nena aren't forgotten. Fighting so that other families don't have to endure this same nightmare. Because this story, it's not unique. Every year, countless families are torn apart by senseless violence. Mothers who never come home. Daughters who never get to fulfill their potential. And each time we ask the same question, when will it stop? The legal system will do what it does. Trials, verdicts, sentences. But for the families, there is no verdict that brings their loved ones back. There is no sentence that erases the pain. There is only the long, brutal work of learning to live in a world where the person you love most is gone. In a city built on dreams, 3 women lost theirs to senseless violence. But their name, their stories, their light, those don't have to die. Los Angeles, the city of dreams. That's what they call it. What they've always called it. A place where ambition meets opportunity, where the impossible becomes possible, where anyone, from anywhere, can rewrite their story. But there's another side to Los Angeles. A side the postcards don't show. A side the tour guides don't mention. It's the side where dreams die in an instant, where celebration turns to tragedy, where the pursuit of something beautiful can lead to something horrific. Ayanna Hutton came to Los Angeles chasing music, chasing validation, chasing proof that her faith, her grind, her talent mattered. She never got to see how far she could go. Destiny Sims came to Los Angeles to support a friend. To feel alive, to remember who she was beyond being a mother, a caretaker, a constant giver. She never made it home to her children. Nena Davis came to Los Angeles because that's what sisters do. They show up, they support, they love. She never got to say goodbye. 3 women, 3 stories, 3 lives cut short by violence they didn't deserve. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the luxury rental industry that turns mansions into anonymous party venues with little oversight, about gang violence that doesn't respect state lines or innocent bystanders, about a culture where grudges, egos, and retaliation are valued more than human life, and about how quickly joy can turn to horror when the wrong people walk through the door. The Beverly Crest Massacre wasn't just a crime. It was a reminder. A reminder that safety is an illusion, that privilege doesn't protect you, that being in the wrong place at the wrong time can cost you everything. But more than that, it was a loss of potential, of dreams, of love. 3 mothers who will never watch their children grow up. 3 daughters who will never hug their parents again. 3 friends who will never share another laugh, another memory, another moment. Justice may be served. The suspects may spend the rest of their lives behind bars. But justice doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't fill the empty seats at the dinner table. It doesn't answer the questions children ask in the middle of the night. It doesn't erase the trauma of those who survived, who carry the weight of that night with them every single day. Justice is necessary, but it's not enough. So, what do we do with stories like this? We remember. We say their names. Ayanna Hutton, Destiny Sims, Nena Davis. We honor their dreams, their love, their light. We refuse to let them become just another headline, just another statistic, just another tragedy we scroll past. Because they were more than victims. They were mothers, artists, friends, dreamers. They were people who mattered, who loved, who were loved, and their lives deserve to be remembered. In a city built on dreams, 3 women lost theirs to senseless violence, but their legacy doesn't have to end in that car, on that street, on that terrible night. Their legacy lives on in the children they raised, in the friends they inspired, in the communities they touched. Their legacy lives on in every person who hears their story and decides to choose love over hate, connection over violence, life over death. Let their names remind us. Even in paradise, danger hides in the shadows. Even in celebration, tragedy can strike. And even in a city of dreams, some dreams are stolen before they ever have a chance to come true. Justice for Ayanna. Justice for Destiny. Justice for Nena. May they rest in peace, and may we never forget. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of the fragility of life and the importance of remembering those we've lost, then stay with me just a little longer. 3 women. 1 night. A tragedy that shook 2 cities and left scars that may never fully heal. The Beverly Crest triple murder is a story about dreams deferred, lives stolen, and families forever changed. But it's also a story about justice, about communities demanding answers, about law enforcement crossing state lines to bring killers to account. And most importantly, it's a story about remembering that behind every crime statistic is a human being, a person with hopes, fears, loved ones, and a future that was ripped away. If this case haunted you the way it haunted me, you're not alone. Tragically, stories like this aren't rare. Senseless violence, ambush-style attacks, lives lost at celebrations that should have been safe. And if stories like these matter to you, if you believe in honoring victims by telling their truth, then I hope you'll subscribe. This channel is dedicated to real stories, real people, real justice. We don't sensationalize, we don't exploit, we remember. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join a community that refuses to let these stories be forgotten. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for caring. Rest in peace, Ayanna Hutton. Rest in peace, Destiny Sims. Rest in peace, Nena Davis. Your names, your stories, your light, we won't forget.
Tragedy at this Houston Heights apartment complex. Houston police say it's where 9-year-old Kylie Sorrells died after she was intentionally shot and killed by Jeremiah Jones, her mom Brittany Sorrells' ex-boyfriend. Police believe the motive appears to be revenge. They say Jones was upset about a recent breakup with Kylie's mother. He showed up at the apartment and confronted her as she watched a movie with her 3 daughters. The argument escalated. At one point, Jones even ripped a TV off the wall. Jones accused Sorrells of cheating. Police say he ultimately went back to the bedroom and shot Kylie in the head, execution style. Before leaving the apartment, investigators tell us he shot Brittany too in the shoulder. She was rushed to the hospital and is expected to survive.
A 9-year-old girl was watching a movie in bed together with her 2 younger sisters when her mother's ex-boyfriend walked into the room. 2 gunshots later, she was gone forever. But this wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated murder. What would you do if your ex refused to let go? Brittany Sorrells thought she was safe after getting a restraining order against her ex. She had done everything right, reported the threats, called police, even moved apartments. She was wrong. Because what Brittany didn't know was that he wasn't just angry about their breakup. He was out on 5 separate felony bonds. He had a plan, and he had already decided that if he couldn't have her, he would destroy the things she loved most in this world. Her 9-year-old daughter would pay the ultimate price. But the most chilling part? The GPS in his car would later prove he drove straight to that apartment with murder on his mind. And when he finally faced a jury 3 years later, what he said about killing children would shock everyone in that courtroom. This is the story of how the system failed everyone, and how one family's worst nightmare became a community's wake-up call. Welcome to True Crime Tales HQ. If you're new here, we dive deep into cases that matter, examining not just what happened, but why it happened, and how we can prevent it from happening again. Before we continue, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest investigations. Most importantly, share this video. These stories save lives when the right person sees them at the right time. 9-year-old Kylie Sorrells was the kind of kid who lit up every room she entered. She was a star player on her PAL basketball team in Houston. That's the Police Activities League. Coaches said she was MVP material, with a work ethic that put kids twice her age to shame. When she wasn't dominating on the court, you'd find her creating TikTok videos, dancing and laughing with the infectious joy that only children possess. Kylie had big dreams. She was excited about starting 5th grade that fall. In less than a month, she'd be celebrating her 10th birthday. Double digits, as she kept telling everyone. She was the protective big sister to her 2 younger siblings, ages 7 and 1. Her mother, Brittany, described her as mature beyond her years, the kind of child who helped with the younger kids without being asked. But on that Monday night in June, Kylie was just being a kid. She was snuggled in bed with her mom and sisters, watching a movie. It was a school night, but it was summer, And sometimes family time matters more than bedtime schedules. What none of them knew was that someone was watching. Someone who had been making threats for weeks. Someone who couldn't accept that their relationship was over. 22-year-old Jeremiah Jones had been dating Brittany for 8 months. To the outside world, they might have looked like a normal couple, but behind closed doors, red flags were everywhere. When Brittany finally found the courage to end things 2 months earlier, Jones couldn't let go. The threats started almost immediately. Phone calls where he'd tell her she belonged to him. Text messages promising that if he couldn't have her, no one could. He'd show up unannounced at her apartment, demanding to come in, demanding to talk, demanding another chance. Brittany did what we tell domestic violence victims to do. She documented everything. She called police. She filed reports. Just 1 week before that fatal Monday night, she had to call 911 because Jones showed up at her apartment with a gun, threatening to kill her. She obtained a restraining order. She thought a piece of paper would protect her family. But here's what she didn't know, and what highlights a terrifying failure of our justice system. Jeremiah Jones was out on bond. Not just one bond, 5 separate felony bonds. Let that sink in. 5 different felony charges, and he was walking free. His criminal history stretched back to when he was just 12 years old. Theft, burglary, trespassing, felon in possession of a weapon, evading arrest, and each time the system gave him another chance. Each time he was released to commit more crimes. Crime prevention expert Andy Cahan would later call Kylie the 175th victim of what he termed the Harris County Bond Pandemic, a crisis where repeat offenders are released again and again only to harm innocent people while out on bond. But statistics don't capture the human cost. They don't tell you about a little girl who loved basketball and making videos. They don't describe the fear in a mother's voice when she calls 911, begging for help. They don't explain the helplessness of knowing someone wants to hurt you, but feeling powerless to stop it. Brittany had done everything she could to protect her children. She'd moved apartments, filed police reports, gotten a restraining order, and tried to rebuild her life as a single mother of 3. On the surface, June 13th started like any normal day. Kylie went to her basketball program, came home, had dinner with her family. But 20 miles away, someone was making plans. Someone who had already decided that if he couldn't control Brittany's life, he would destroy it instead. And he was about to prove that sometimes all our precautions aren't enough to stop a man who has nothing left to lose. What happened next would haunt a family forever, expose failures in our justice system, and end the life of a child who should have had 70 more years ahead of her. That Monday evening started like any other. Brittany was in bed with her 3 daughters, 9-year-old Kylie, 7-year-old sister, and their 1-year-old baby sister. They'd chosen a family movie, something fun and lighthearted. The apartment felt safe, cozy. Just a mom and her kids enjoying a quiet summer night. Brittany's cousin was staying with them temporarily, and he'd been going in and out of the apartment throughout the evening. In the interest of convenience, he'd left the front door unlocked. It was a decision that would haunt everyone involved. At 9:47 p.m., Brittany's phone rang. It was her cousin, calling from outside. "Lock the door," he said, urgency in his voice. "Lock it now." But by the time Brittany answered that call, it was already too late. Jeremiah Jones had been planning this moment. GPS data from his car would later prove he drove straight to Brittany's apartment that night. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was premeditated murder. He knew exactly where he was going and what he intended to do. He burst through that unlocked door like a man possessed. The first thing he did was rip the TV off the living room wall. "This is mine," he shouted, dragging it toward the front door. "You can't keep what's mine." But this wasn't about a television. This was about control, about ownership, about a man who couldn't accept that the woman he'd been with for 8 months had chosen to leave him. Brittany emerged from the bedroom, trying to calm the situation. She could hear her children in the back room, confused, scared by the shouting. She needed to protect them, needed to get him out of there. "Take it," she said about the TV. "Just take it and leave." But Jones wasn't finished. His eyes were wild with jealous rage. "Who is he?" Jones demanded. "Who's the man you're seeing?" "There's no one," Brittany insisted. "I'm just trying to raise my kids." Jones didn't believe her. In his twisted mind, she had to be with someone else. That was the only explanation for why she'd left him. He couldn't comprehend that she'd simply had enough of his threats, his violence, his inability to let go. Then came the demand that would seal everyone's fate. "Give me your phone," he ordered. Brittany hesitated. She knew what he was looking for, evidence of another relationship that didn't exist. But she also knew that refusing might make things worse. With her children just feet away, she handed over her phone. Jones scrolled through it frantically, looking for text messages, photos, anything that would confirm his suspicions. When he found nothing, his rage only intensified. What happened next defies comprehension. Instead of leaving with the television he claimed to want, instead of accepting that there was no other man, Jones made a decision that would destroy multiple lives forever. He walked calmly toward the back bedroom where 3 little girls were waiting for their mother to return. Kylie, the protective older sister, was probably trying to comfort her younger siblings, telling them everything would be okay. 2 gunshots rang out. Brittany screamed and ran toward the bedroom, but Jones emerged before she could get there. Without hesitation, without explanation, he shot her in the shoulder. As she fell to the ground, he stepped over her and walked out of the apartment, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. Brittany, bleeding and in shock, crawled to the bedroom where she found Kylie on the floor with a gunshot wound to the head. Her baby was gasping, fighting for life. The other 2 children were screaming, traumatized by witnessing their sister's murder. Through her pain and terror, Brittany managed to call 911. The call that would be played in court 3 years later captured the raw anguish of a mother watching her child die. "Please help us," she begged the operator. "He shot my baby. Please hurry." Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. 9-year-old Kylie Sorrells was pronounced dead at Memorial Hermann Hospital, less than a month before her 10th birthday. Her life was over. Brittany would survive her gunshot wound, but the man who'd terrorized her family was now a killer, and he was already planning his next lie. While paramedics fought to save lives, Jeremiah Jones was already constructing an alibi. Within hours of murdering a 9-year-old child, he was telling anyone who would listen that he was innocent. Houston police immediately issued a BOLO alert, "Be on the lookout," for a black 2019 Chevrolet Camaro with paper tags RTY0500. Jones was considered armed and extremely dangerous. This was now a manhunt for a child killer. But Jones wasn't hiding. Instead, he was doing something almost unthinkable. He was giving interviews. Less than 24 hours after the murder, Jones contacted Fox 26 News and community activist Quanell X, desperately trying to control the narrative.
Jeremiah, let me ask you, did you shoot your ex and her 9-year-old daughter?
No, ma'am.
As a manhunt is underway for 22-year-old Jeremiah Jones, he spoke with me on Zoom, telling me he wasn't there at his ex-girlfriend's apartment and saying he did not do it. But why would his ex-girlfriend tell police he's the one who opened fire on her and her daughter?
Honestly, ma'am, I really don't know. I'm just trying to get all of this resolved. because I was at a gas station on camera minutes before they say, within probably like 15 to 20 minutes before they even said that this happened.
Houston police say it was just before 10 p.m. Monday when Jones's ex-girlfriend says he burst into her Northwest Houston apartment.
There was a short struggle and the kids stayed in the bedroom and she was out in the living room. And before she was even shot, he went directly to the bedroom and for the most part, executed this 9-year-old girl.
Jones's ex-girlfriend ended up shot in the shoulder and was rushed to the hospital where she's expected to survive. Her 9-year-old daughter was shot and killed. Houston Police Chief Troy Finner says, quote, "This senseless act of domestic violence hits home for me and the HPD family. That sweet child was a member of our Police Activities League program."
It just makes me really sad just knowing that, the little girl didn't make it.
People are just shooting people now,
and it's okay, and I'm not okay with that. It's heartbreaking to hear. I'm devastated.
Meanwhile, Jones, who is out of jail on bond for several charges, says he and his attorney are in the process of retrieving store surveillance video that he says will prove he was about 20 miles away from his ex-girlfriend's apartment when she and her daughter were shot. He says he's going to turn himself in.
I have no reason to hide. I'm going to turn myself in. I just want my lawyer to get all the proper documents for me.
Houston police investigators say they are pulling surveillance video of their own from here at the apartment complex, and they believe it will show that Jones was here at the complex. Houston Police Chief Troy Finner is also urging Jeremiah Jones to turn himself in.
On Tuesday evening, June 14th, the charade ended. HPD SWAT officers surrounded Jones in a parking lot on Imperial Valley Drive. When they arrested him, he was armed with another weapon, proving he remained a danger to the community. The man who claimed innocence, who said he was cooperating with the authorities, who insisted he had nothing to hide, was taken into custody without incident. His lies about gas station timestamps crumbled when investigators confirmed the GPS data showing his exact route to and from the murder scene. The investigation was solid. The evidence was overwhelming. But now came the hardest part: convincing a jury that a man who could look directly into news cameras and lie about murdering a child deserved the ultimate punishment. 2.5 years later, Jones would finally face the family he'd destroyed, and his performance in that courtroom would be even more chilling than his television interviews.
When the trial began in July 2025, the courtroom was packed with Kylie's family, supporters, and those seeking justice for a child whose life was cut short. Jeremiah Jones, now 25, sat at the defense table in shackles, his face emotionless as prosecutors laid out their case. The evidence against him was overwhelming. GPS data proved premeditation. Witness testimony established motive. Physical evidence placed him at the scene. But what happened when Jones took the stand would shock everyone present. Brittany Sorrells faced the unimaginable task of testifying about the night her daughter was murdered. She had to relive every horrific moment while sitting just feet away from the man who destroyed her family. The courtroom fell silent as she described watching Jones walk calmly to the bedroom where her children waited. She testified about hearing those 2 gunshots, about finding Kylie dying on the floor, about the screams of her other daughters who witnessed their sister's execution. During her testimony, Brittany needed multiple breaks just to breathe through the trauma. At one point, she said something that captured her survival mechanism. "I had to laugh to stop from crying." The defense tried to paint her as negligent, a party girl who put her children in danger. But none of their character assassination explained how a 9-year-old ended up shot execution style in her own home. Then came the 911 call. The jury heard Brittany's screams as she found Kylie gasping for life. They played it not once, but 3 times. The audio filled the room like a haunting that rattled everyone present. Jurors clenched fists, wiped away tears. Some turned away completely. Others stared directly at Jones, searching for any sign of remorse, any indication that he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. Jones sat like absence in a hoodie, stoic, emotionless, detached. He looked like a man watching his own funeral, disconnected from the grief because feeling it might kill him. When Jones finally took the stand, he told a story so fractured it barely held together. His testimony was a masterclass in deflection and delusion. First, he claimed he wasn't at the apartment that night. Then, confronted with GPS evidence, he admitted he was there. Next, he said Brittany shot first, twice, and somehow missed both times from close range. Then he claimed he only shot her once in self-defense. But through all his contradictions, through all his attempts to rewrite reality, one thing remained constant. He never once said Kylie's name. Not once. Instead, he spent his time on the stand attacking Brittany, called her crazy, said their relationship was just sex, claimed she liked to party, that she didn't work. as if character assassination could somehow erase the blood on his hands. Then came the moment that sealed his fate. In the middle of questioning, unprompted, he suddenly blurted out, "I would never hurt you or the kids." It wasn't for the court. It wasn't for the jury. It was directed at Brittany, a desperate plea from a man begging someone, anyone, to believe he was still good. But the prosecutor wasn't finished. In a moment of courtroom brilliance, they asked him a simple question. If someone killed your daughter, what should happen to them? Jones's answer dropped like a sinkhole. It depends. The courtroom collectively gasped. That wasn't evasion, that was complete moral bankruptcy. If a man, a father, can say it depends when asked how to punish a child killer, what more did anyone need to know? The GPS evidence destroyed his alibi completely. Digital tracking showed his exact route to the apartment, his time there, and his escape route. The prosecution proved this wasn't a crime of passion, it was premeditated murder. The jury deliberated for hours, but the verdict was never really in doubt. When they returned, Jones stood emotionless as the foreman read, "Guilty of capital murder." On July 18, 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would never again walk free, never again threaten another family, never again have the chance to destroy innocent lives. As the gavel fell, Brittany and her family finally had justice. But justice couldn't bring back a 9-year-old girl who loved basketball and TikTok videos. Justice couldn't erase the trauma of 2 little girls who watched their sister die. Justice couldn't restore the future that was stolen from a family that had already survived so much. Jeremiah Jones would spend the rest of his life behind bars, but Kylie Sorrells would remain forever 9 years old. The verdict closed one chapter, but it opened bigger questions about how we protect children and whether our systems truly serve justice.
But beyond this courtroom victory lies a harder truth about the systems that failed Kylie long before that fatal night. Her death wasn't just the result of one man's violence. It was the predictable outcome of a broken system that had multiple chances to prevent this tragedy. Remember, Jeremiah Jones was out on 5 separate felony bonds when he committed murder. 5 different opportunities where judges could have kept him locked up. 5 times the system chose to give him another chance instead of protecting the community. Crime victims advocate Andy Cahan put it bluntly. They had this guy multiple times. They had umpteen chances to keep him in custody. Every time he was released on bond, he violated his bond conditions by being charged with yet another crime. Legal analyst Carmen Rowe explained the missed opportunities. If you are on bond for a felony offense and you pick up a new felony offense, you are no longer entitled to a bond. The judge can deny bond completely. In this particular case, it appears he had several opportunities where the state could have filed to deny him bond. But it didn't happen, and Kylie paid the price. This case highlights a disturbing pattern in domestic violence situations. Brittany Sorrells did everything we tell victims to do. She documented threats. She called the police. She filed reports. She obtained a restraining order. She even moved apartments trying to escape. The week before Kylie's murder, she called 911 because Jones showed up with a gun threatening to kill her. Law enforcement responded, but Jones remained free. The restraining order became just another piece of paper he chose to ignore. How many more Kylies are out there right now? How many children are sleeping in homes where their mother's ex-partner is making threats, violating protective orders, and being repeatedly released by a system that prioritizes second chances over public safety? Kylie's grandmother, Tracy Sorrells, channeled her grief into advocacy. She's fighting for legislation in her granddaughter's name, a law that would make repeated threats carry the same legal weight as actually carrying them out.
She called 911. She reported the threats. Things have to change. I'm trusting God. I know my granddaughter is an angel. The Houston Police Department's Police Activities League, where Kylie was a star player, continues to honor her memory. Her basketball team dedicated their season to her. Her coaches still talk about the little girl with MVP skills and an even bigger heart. But perhaps the most important lesson from Kylie's story isn't about criminal justice reform or domestic violence prevention. It's about seeing the humanity in victims before tragedy strikes. Kylie wasn't just a statistic. She was a real little girl with dreams and talents and a future that should have stretched decades ahead of her. She protected her younger sisters. She worked hard at basketball. She made silly videos that made people laugh. She was excited about turning 10, about starting 5th grade, about all the ordinary milestones that make up a childhood. Those dreams died with her in a hospital room less than a month before her birthday. One eyewitness who attended Jones' trial wrote about the experience, describing what they saw in the defendant, not a monster, but a man who'd been dying long before the trial began. They spoke of cycles of trauma, about young black men failed by systems that should have helped them, about the complexity of justice in cases like this. But complexity doesn't excuse murder. Understanding root causes doesn't diminish accountability. And examining systemic failures doesn't minimize the very real choice Jeremiah Jones made when he walked into that bedroom and pulled the trigger twice. Kylie Sorrells should be 12 years old today. She should be in 7th grade, probably still dominating on basketball courts across Houston. She should be making new TikTok videos, rolling her eyes at her mom's jokes, helping her younger sisters with homework. Instead, she's frozen forever at 9 years old in family photographs and in the memories of those who loved her. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How many warning signs do we need before we act? How many second chances should repeat offenders get? When does rehabilitation become enablement? When does compassion for offenders become cruelty to victims? Jeremiah Jones will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but that won't bring back the little girl whose future he stole. True justice for Kylie would have been prevention, a system that recognized the danger before it was too late, a community that protected her before she needed avenging. We tell this story not for entertainment, but for remembrance, so that Kylie Sorrells isn't forgotten, so that her death might prevent another, so that somewhere, somehow, the next little girl like her gets the protection she deserved. Rest in peace, Kylie. You should still be here.
For the Toledo woman who was fighting for her life after a Wednesday morning shooting has died. Toledo police say Ashley Morris, who also goes by Ashley Fonseca, died yesterday as a result of her injuries. Officers say 46-year-old Lawrence Moore shot Fonseca at the Boulder Creek Apartments, then shot himself in the chest, ultimately dying at the scene. According to a 911 call, Moore was the woman's boyfriend. 13 Action News spotted a growing memorial for Fonseca outside the apartments. You see balloons hanging from the outside of the apartment building, also on a car in the parking lot there.
I can't take this anymore. He's always threatening to punch me in my face and knock my teeth out, and my kids are gonna be motherless. Constantly putting the gun up against my head or shoving it in my stomach. These were the desperate words Ashley Michelle Morris posted on Facebook just hours before she was murdered. But this wasn't just another tragic case of domestic violence. This was history repeating itself in the most horrifying way possible. In today's video, you'll discover how a cycle of violence spanning 27 years claimed 2 generations of the same family. You'll learn about a 10-year-old girl who survived being stabbed 14 times, only to fall victim to the same pattern of abuse that killed her mother. And you'll see how the very system meant to protect her failed at every critical moment. Before we dive into this heartbreaking story, I want you to think about this. Have you ever seen warning signs that others missed? Have you ever wondered if you could have done something to help someone in an abusive situation? Keep that question in mind as we explore Ashley's story, because by the end of this video, you might see those signs very differently. Ashley Morris was born into violence. When she was just 10 years old, her world was shattered in the most unimaginable way. Her mother, Vivian Morris, was stalked and murdered by a coworker who couldn't accept rejection. But Ashley didn't just witness this violence, she became its victim too, stabbed 14 times by the same man who killed her mother. 27 years later, in June 2025, Ashley would meet her own tragic end at the hands of another abuser. The parallels are chilling. The patterns, devastating. And the failure to break this generational cycle of violence raises uncomfortable questions about how we protect the most vulnerable among us. Welcome to True Crime Tales HQ. If you're new here, we dive deep into cases that matter, examining not just what happened, but why it happened and how we can prevent it from happening again. Before we continue, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest investigations. Most importantly, share this video. These stories save lives when the right person sees them at the right time. This is more than just a true crime story. This is a wake-up call about domestic violence, about how trauma can echo through generations, and about how quickly a cry for help can become a final goodbye. To understand how Ashley's life ended so tragically, we need to go back to where it all began, to February 13, 1998, when a 10-year-old girl experienced violence that would shape the rest of her life. Ashley Michelle Morris was like any other 10-year-old girl in Toledo, Ohio. She lived in the Brook Park apartments off Jackman Road with her mother Vivian and her younger brother Adam. It was a simple life, school, friends, playing with her brother, and the comfort of her mother's love. But underneath this ordinary facade, danger was brewing. Someone was watching, someone was obsessing, and someone was about to turn their quiet apartment complex into a crime scene that would haunt Toledo for decades. Vivian Morris was a young single mother trying to provide for her 2 children. She worked alongside a man named Joe Chappell, who had developed what could only be described as a dangerous obsession with her. Chappell had asked Vivian out repeatedly. Each time, she politely declined. But Chappell couldn't, or wouldn't, take no for an answer. What started as unwanted advances escalated into full-blown stalking behavior that left Vivian increasingly frightened. Vivian did everything right. She reported Chappell to their supervisors at work. When that didn't stop him, she took her concerns to the Toledo courts, filing formal complaints about his stalking behavior. She was trying to protect herself and her children through the proper channels, but the system that was supposed to protect her moved too slowly. And Joe Chappell's rage was building to a breaking point. February 13, 1998. Friday the 13th. It was a date that would forever be etched in Toledo's memory as one of the city's most violent days. What happened next wasn't just a domestic violence incident, it was the beginning of what authorities would later call the Trail of Terror. That afternoon, Joe Chappell drove to the Brook Park apartments. Neighbors later said they saw him exit his car, and in his hand, he carried a knife. His obsession with Vivian Morris was about to explode into unthinkable violence. When Chappell entered that apartment, he didn't just come for Vivian. He came for anyone who stood between him and his twisted desire for control. Ashley was the first to encounter Chappell that day. A 10-year-old girl faced with a grown man consumed by rage and armed with a knife. What happened next is almost impossible to comprehend. Chappell stabbed Ashley 14 times. 14 times. Let that sink in for a moment. This was a child, and she was stabbed 14 times by a man who was supposed to be stopped by the very system her mother had turned to for help. But Ashley's nightmare wasn't over. After attacking her, Chappell went after her younger brother Adam, wounding him as well. Then he turned his fury on their mother, Vivian, inflicting wounds so severe that she would later die in the ambulance. Somehow, miraculously, Ashley survived. But survival came at an unimaginable cost. The physical trauma was devastating. She suffered damage to her heart, developing mitral valve prolapse from the attack. Her tendons were severed. She was left with scars that would cover her body for the rest of her life. But the physical scars were nothing compared to the emotional trauma. At 10 years old, Ashley had witnessed her mother's murder. She had felt the killer's blade pierce her own small body again and again. She had experienced a level of violence that most adults never encounter. Ashley would later say she remembered everything. Every detail of that day remained crystal clear in her memory. It still feels fresh, she would tell reporters 25 years later. I was old enough to still remember everything. I remember everything. Everything. Imagine surviving something like this at just 10 years old. What would you tell young Ashley if you could go back in time? What words of comfort or strength would you offer a child who had just experienced the unthinkable? I want you to think about that as we continue, because Ashley's story of survival is just beginning. But Joe Chappell wasn't finished. The attack on Ashley and her family was just the first stop on his trail of terror. And what happened next would show just how far his rage would carry him, turning one family's tragedy into a citywide nightmare that would claim even more innocent lives. Before we continue with Ashley's recovery, let me quickly tell you what happened to Joe Chappell after he left that apartment. His trail of terror continued through Toledo. He carjacked a woman at gunpoint, tracked down and shot at the ambulances carrying Ashley and her family, wounding 2 first responders. He then killed another innocent woman, 21-year-old Brandy Williams, when she refused to give him her truck keys. The rampage finally ended when Toledo police shot and killed Chappell near the intersection of Monroe and Secker Road. But while the city of Toledo could breathe again, for Ashley Morris, the real battle was just beginning. The doctors weren't sure Ashley would survive. 14 stab wounds had left her body broken in ways that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old to overcome. The knife had damaged her heart, causing mitral valve prolapse, a condition that would affect her for the rest of her life. Her tendons had been severed, requiring extensive surgery and rehabilitation. But Ashley was a fighter. Day by day, surgery by surgery, she began to heal. The scars that covered her body told the story of that horrible day, but they also became symbols of her incredible strength. She would later get a tattoo on her hand with one simple word: survivor. The emotional healing was far more complex. How does a child process witnessing her mother's murder? How does she make sense of violence that's senseless? Ashley carried the weight of that day with her everywhere she went. She remembered every detail, every moment, every sound. The trauma was as fresh 25 years later as it had been in that hospital room. It still feels fresh, Ashley would say decades later. I was old enough to still remember everything. I was 10. I remember everything, everything. In the aftermath of unimaginable tragedy, Ashley found something precious, a stable, loving home. She went to live with her father and stepmother, who provided the kind of environment she desperately needed to heal. They gave her structure, love, and most importantly, the space to grieve and recover at her own pace. Ashley's new family didn't try to erase what had happened or pretend the trauma didn't exist. Instead, they helped her channel her pain into something powerful: determination. Ashley refused to let Joe Chappell's violence define her entire life. She was going to be more than just a victim. As Ashley grew older, she made a conscious choice. She could let the violence of that day consume her, or she could use her experience to become stronger. She chose strength. Ashley got tattoos that told her story, not just the survivor tattoo on her hand, but also her mother's name on her shoulder, a constant reminder of the woman who had tried so hard to protect her family. She got another detailed tattoo for a baby she had lost, showing that even in her own life, Ashley understood the preciousness of the people we love. She stayed in Toledo, close to where her mother and baby were buried in the same cemetery plot. Some might have seen this as being trapped by the past, but for Ashley, it was about honoring those she'd lost while building a life of her own. Ashley became a mother herself, raising 2 boys, DeAndre and D'Angelo. She was determined to give them the love and security that had been so violently ripped away from her own childhood. She would tell them stories about their grandmother Vivian, making sure they knew how much she had loved her children and how she would have loved them. But trauma has a way of following us, even when we think we've overcome it. And the patterns of violence that had shaped Ashley's childhood were about to resurface in ways she never could have imagined. Because while Ashley had survived one monster, she was about to encounter another. And this time, the warning signs would be just as clear, the cries for help just as desperate, and the system's failures just as devastating. In 2025, 27 years after that first attack, history would repeat itself in the most heartbreaking way possible. Ashley Morris had survived the unthinkable and built a life filled with love for her 2 sons. But trauma has a cruel way of making us vulnerable to the very patterns we're trying to escape. And in 2025, those patterns would come full circle in a way that seems almost impossible to believe. Lawrence Moore entered Ashley's life like so many abusers do, not as an obvious threat, but as someone who seemed to offer companionship, maybe even love. Ashley, now going by Ashley Fonseca, was 37 years old, a devoted mother trying to provide for her boys while carrying the invisible scars of her childhood trauma. But Lawrence Moore was not the man he appeared to be. And perhaps most chilling of all, the warning signs were there, documented, official, impossible to ignore. This wasn't Moore's first brush with domestic violence. Court records show that in July 2013, he had been convicted of domestic violence after entering a no-contest plea in Toledo Municipal Court. Then, as recently as June 2020, just 5 years before he would kill Ashley, he was charged with domestic violence again. That case was dropped by prosecutors. Think about that for a moment. The system had Lawrence Moore's history. His pattern was documented. His capacity for violence was known. And yet somehow, he was free to enter Ashley's life and begin the cycle all over again. Like most abusers, Lawrence Moore didn't show his true nature immediately. The early stages of their relationship likely seemed normal, even caring. This is how abusers operate. They draw their victims in with charm, affection, and the promise of love and security. But gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, the control began. Maybe it started with small suggestions about who Ashley should spend time with. Perhaps comments about her decisions that seemed helpful but were actually designed to undermine her confidence. The isolation that abusers create doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, methodical process that leaves victims feeling confused and alone. As the relationship progressed, Moore's true nature emerged. The threats became more explicit, more terrifying. He would threaten to punch Ashley in the face, to knock her teeth out, leaving her children motherless. But it wasn't just verbal threats. Moore had a gun, and he wasn't shy about using it to terrorize Ashley. He would put the gun against her head. He would shove it into her stomach. He would destroy her belongings in fits of rage. This wasn't just domestic violence. This was psychological torture designed to break Ashley's spirit and make her feel completely powerless. Ashley wasn't naive about abuse. She had lived through the worst kind of violence imaginable. She knew what the warning signs looked like. She understood the danger she was in. But knowing and being able to escape are two very different things. Domestic violence isn't just about physical harm, it's about a systematic destruction of a person's sense of self-worth, their support systems, their belief that they deserve better. Ashley was trapped not just by Moore's threats, but by the complex psychological web that abusers weave around their victims. We have to remember that Ashley was also thinking about her children. Abusers are experts at making their victims believe that leaving will only make things worse, that the children will be in more danger if they try to escape. Moore's threats weren't abstract. They were specific, terrifying, and backed up by a history of violence that gave them weight. Ashley was caught in an impossible situation. She recognized the pattern. How could she not, given her history? But recognition doesn't automatically translate to an easy escape, especially when children are involved and the abuser has made it clear that violence is always on the table. The cruelest irony of Ashley's situation was that she was living out the very cycle she had spent her entire life trying to break. The little girl who had survived being stabbed 14 times was now an adult woman facing death threats from another man who couldn't handle rejection, couldn't accept boundaries, and saw violence as his right. But Ashley Morris was not going to suffer in silence. She was going to reach out, to ask for help, to make one last desperate attempt to save herself and protect her children. What she posted on social media in her final hours would be a cry for help that should have been impossible to ignore. And yet, tragically, it was. In her final hours, Ashley Morris did something that took incredible courage. She broke her silence. She reached out to the world through the one platform she had left, social media. What she posted on Facebook would be her last desperate attempt to save herself and protect her children. "I can't take this MF always threatening me, he's gonna punch me in my face and knock my teeth out and my kids are gonna be motherless. Constantly putting the gun up against my head or shoving it in my stomach. Destroying my stuff every chance he gets. This is getting out of control, I don't feel safe." Read that again. Think about what it took for Ashley to write those words. This wasn't a vague complaint or a moment of frustration. This was a woman documenting her own potential murder. She was telling the world, in explicit detail, that Lawrence Moore was threatening to kill her with a gun. She was saying, in her own words, that her children were about to become motherless. Ashley wasn't just scared, she was terrified. The woman who had survived being stabbed 14 times as a child, who had overcome unimaginable trauma and built a life for herself, was now facing the same kind of violence that had shattered her childhood. And she knew it. She mentioned her children specifically, "My kids are gonna be motherless." Think about that. Ashley wasn't just afraid for herself. She was afraid of what her death would do to DeAndre, 15, and D'Angelo, 7. She was afraid of leaving them orphaned, traumatized, alone. Here's what should haunt all of us about this case. Ashley's cry for help was public. It was specific. It was urgent. It was posted on Facebook for her friends, family, and community to see. This wasn't a private struggle happening behind closed doors. This was a woman literally broadcasting her fear that she was about to be murdered. And the response was, silence. How many people saw that post? How many scrolled past it without stopping? How many read it but didn't know what to do? How many thought someone else would handle it, or that it wasn't their place to get involved? We live in an age where we share everything on social media, what we eat, where we go, what we think about television shows. But when a woman posts that her life is in danger, when she documents specific threats of violence, when she says she doesn't feel safe, somehow that gets lost in the noise. This wasn't a case where the warning signs were hidden or subtle. Ashley literally spelled out the danger she was in. She named the threats: violence to her face, gun threats, destruction of property. She said she felt unsafe. She worried about her children becoming motherless. It was all there, in black and white, posted on social media for the world to see. And yet, less than 24 hours later, Ashley Morris would be fighting for her life in a hospital bed. I want you to stop and think about this for a moment. What would you have done if you saw this post from a friend? Would you have called the police? Would you have reached out to Ashley directly? Would you have tried to connect her with domestic violence resources? This isn't about blame or guilt, it's about understanding how easily cries for help can be missed, even when they're right in front of us. Comment below and let me know, have you ever seen warning signs like this on social media? How do we, as a community, do better at recognizing and responding to these desperate pleas? The tragic reality is that Ashley's post wasn't just ignored, it became evidence. Evidence of a pattern of abuse that the system had already failed to stop. Evidence of threats that would become reality. Evidence of a woman who tried everything she could think of to save herself and protect her children. Because on the morning of June 25, 2025, just hours after posting her desperate plea for help, Ashley Morris would discover that Lawrence Moore's threats weren't empty. They were promises. And he was about to keep them in the most brutal way possible. It was 9 a.m. on the morning of June 25, 2025, at the Boulder Creek Apartments on South Burn Road in Toledo. Ashley Morris had posted her desperate plea for help on Facebook just hours earlier. Her two sons, 15-year-old DeAndre and 7-year-old D'Angelo, were home with her, probably getting ready for what they thought would be just another summer day. They had no way of knowing they were about to witness something that would change their lives forever. What happened next in that apartment represents the tragic end of a cycle that began 27 years earlier. Lawrence Moore, the man who had been threatening Ashley with a gun, who had been terrorizing her with promises of violence, finally made good on those threats. The details are as brutal as they are heartbreaking. Moore shot Ashley multiple times before turning the gun on himself. But perhaps the most devastating aspect of this tragedy is who witnessed it: Ashley's children. 15-year-old DeAndre was forced to become the adult in the room. This teenager, who should have been worried about summer vacation and hanging out with friends, instead had to call 911 to report that his mother had been shot. Can you imagine the terror in that child's voice as he tried to explain to the dispatcher what he was seeing? 7-year-old D'Angelo was there too, watching his world collapse in real time. These children didn't just lose their mother that morning, they were traumatized in a way that mirrors what happened to their mother when she was 10 years old. The parallels are impossible to ignore. In 1998, 10-year-old Ashley witnessed her mother's murder and was nearly killed herself. In 2025, her own children witnessed her murder and will carry that trauma for the rest of their lives. The cycle of violence had claimed another generation. When paramedics arrived at the Boulder Creek Apartments, they found Lawrence Moore dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest. But Ashley was still alive, still fighting. She was rushed to the University of Toledo Medical Center with critical injuries, clinging to life. For more than 24 hours, Ashley Morris fought the same battle her mother had fought 27 years earlier, the battle to survive senseless violence. The medical team worked tirelessly to save her life, performing multiple surgeries, doing everything in their power to give Ashley a chance. Her family gathered at the hospital. Friends came to show support. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that Ashley might defy the odds once again. She had survived being stabbed 14 times as a child, maybe she could survive this too. But the damage was too severe. The multiple gunshot wounds had caused injuries that even the most skilled medical team couldn't overcome. On June 26, 2025, at 7:47 p.m., Ashley Morris Fonseca was declared dead at the University of Toledo Medical Center. She was 37 years old. She left behind two traumatized sons who had witnessed her murder, and a community that was only beginning to understand how completely the system had failed her. But even in her final hours, Ashley Morris showed the same strength and compassion that had carried her through a lifetime of trauma. She had made the decision to be an organ donor, meaning that even in death, she could help save other lives. The hospital held what's called an honor walk, a ceremony where Ashley's bed was wheeled through the hallways as medical staff, friends, and family lined the corridors to pay their respects. Video of this moment, posted to Facebook, shows the bed stopping at the threshold of the surgical wing, with Ashley's loved ones gathering around to say their final goodbyes. It's a heartbreaking image. This woman who had survived so much, who had tried so hard to break the cycle of violence, surrounded by people who loved her as she made her final journey. Ashley Morris, the 10-year-old survivor, had become Ashley Fonseca, a 37-year-old victim of the very pattern she had spent her life trying to escape. But Ashley's death wasn't just the end of her story, it was the beginning of a new chapter of trauma for her children, and a stark reminder of how domestic violence doesn't just claim individual victims. It destroys families, traumatizes children, and perpetuates cycles of pain that can last for generations. The question now was, what would happen to DeAndre and D'Angelo? How would they process what they had seen? And would anyone finally recognize that this wasn't just another domestic violence case? This was a preventable tragedy that the system had failed to prevent at every critical juncture. When the gunshots stopped and the sirens faded, when the medical team at the hospital had done everything they could, when Ashley Morris had been laid to rest, the most vulnerable victims of this tragedy were just beginning to face their new reality. DeAndre, 15, and D'Angelo, 7, were now orphans. But more than that, they were traumatized witnesses to their mother's murder, carrying wounds that no child should ever have to bear. Think about what these boys experienced. 7-year-old D'Angelo watched a man with a gun destroy his world in a matter of minutes. At an age when children should feel safe and protected, he witnessed the violent death of the person who meant everything to him. 15-year-old DeAndre not only watched his mother die, but was forced to become the responsible adult in the situation. This teenager had to call 911, had to try to explain the horror he was witnessing, had to somehow hold himself together while his little brother fell apart. The trauma these children experienced goes far beyond the immediate shock of witnessing violence. They now have to live with the knowledge that their mother died trying to protect them, that she posted about her fear of leaving them motherless, and that her worst fear came true right in front of their eyes. D'Angelo, at just 7 years old, will grow up with memories of that morning burned into his consciousness. Child psychologists tell us that witnessing domestic violence can be just as traumatic for children as experiencing it directly. These boys didn't just lose their mother, they lost their sense of safety, their trust in the world, their belief that adults can protect them. The father of one of Ashley's sons, fighting back tears in interviews, said simply, "I feel terrible. I hate that my son's mom had to experience this." But perhaps even more heartbreaking was his recognition of what the children had witnessed, just knowing that he had to be the one to call 911. I can't imagine. The parallels to Ashley's own childhood are impossible to ignore. Just as Ashley had been forced to witness her mother's murder at age 10, her own children were now facing the same unthinkable trauma. The cycle wasn't just continuing, it was accelerating. This is what domestic violence really looks like. It's not just about the immediate victim, devastating as that is. It's about the ripple effects that spread through generations, traumatizing children who grow up to face their own struggles with trust, relationships, and safety. Ashley had spent 27 years trying to heal from witnessing her mother's murder. She had worked to build a stable life, to be a good mother, to break the cycle of violence that had destroyed her childhood. But trauma has a way of making people vulnerable to the very patterns they're trying to escape. Now DeAndre and D'Angelo are starting their own journey with trauma. They're beginning a process that their mother knew all too well. Learning to live with memories that will never fade, learning to trust again after witnessing the ultimate betrayal of trust, learning to feel safe in a world that has shown them how quickly safety can be destroyed. The boys are staying with family following the tragedy, but family love and support, as crucial as they are, can't erase what these children have seen. They will need therapy, time, and incredible amounts of patience and understanding as they try to make sense of what happened to their mother. But perhaps most tragically, they will grow up knowing that their mother's death could have been prevented. They will learn that Lawrence Moore had a history of domestic violence, that Ashley had posted about her fears on social media, that there were warning signs and opportunities for intervention that were missed. Will DeAndre and D'Angelo be able to break the cycle that claimed their mother and grandmother? Will they receive the support and resources they need to heal? Or will they, like their mother before them, carry this trauma into their adult lives, potentially making them vulnerable to the very patterns that destroyed their family? These are the questions that should keep us all awake at night. Because while we can't bring Ashley back, while we can't undo the trauma these children have experienced, we can examine how this tragedy happened and what failures in our systems allowed it to occur. The truth is, Ashley Morris didn't have to die. The warning signs were there, the history was documented, the cries for help were public and specific. So how did we fail her so completely? And what does that mean for other women who are posting their own desperate pleas on social media right now? Ashley Morris should be alive today. The tragedy of June 25, 2025, was preventable. The failures that led to her death reveal uncomfortable truths about how we handle domestic violence. Lawrence Moore wasn't a mystery. His violence was documented. July 2013. Convicted of domestic violence in Toledo Municipal Court. June 2020. Charged with domestic violence again, but prosecutors dropped the case. The system knew Moore was dangerous, yet there's no registry warning future partners. No system to alert women about their partner's history of violence. But even when Ashley made her fears public on Facebook, documenting specific death threats with a gun, the response was silence. Ashley's post was explicit, constantly putting the gun up against my head or shoving it in my stomach. This wasn't subtle, it was a woman documenting her potential murder, posted publicly for anyone to see. Yet we have no systems to identify genuine cries for help on social media. Companies can track our shopping habits but can't flag when someone posts about being threatened with murder. Even if someone had called police about Ashley's post, what would have happened? Many jurisdictions don't act on threats alone, they wait for actual violence. By then, it's often too late. This represents our backwards approach. We wait for violence to happen rather than preventing it. This is where I want to hear from you. What changes do you think need to happen to prevent cases like Ashley's? Should social media companies flag posts containing death threats? Should domestic violence convictions carry real consequences? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because unless we demand changes, we'll see more cases like this. More women posting desperate pleas that go unheard. More children witnessing their mother's murders. We failed Ashley Morris. But maybe her story can become a catalyst for changes that could save the next Ashley Morris. In the darkest moments of tragedy, sometimes the most profound acts of humanity shine through. Ashley Morris, even in her final hours, would demonstrate the same strength and generosity that had carried her through a lifetime of unimaginable challenges. As Ashley lay dying in the University of Toledo Medical Center, facing the reality that she might not survive Lawrence Moore's attack, she made a decision that perfectly encapsulates who she was as a person. She chose to be an organ donor. Think about that for a moment. This woman, who had survived being stabbed 14 times as a child, who had spent 27 years healing from trauma and building a life for her children, was facing death at the hands of another abuser. And in those final moments, her thoughts weren't consumed by bitterness or revenge. They were focused on how she could help others, even in death. The hospital's honor walk, that video of Ashley's bed being wheeled through corridors lined with medical staff, friends, and family, captures something beautiful about who Ashley was. Even as her loved ones said their final goodbyes, even as her children faced the unthinkable reality of losing their mother, Ashley was about to give the gift of life to strangers she would never meet. Her organs would go on to help other people live, love, and build families of their own. In death, Ashley Morris saved lives. It was her final act of defiance against the violence that had shaped so much of her existence. But Ashley's legacy extends far beyond her generous decision to be an organ donor. Her story has become a powerful illustration of how domestic violence operates, how it perpetuates across generations, and how our systems continue to fail the most vulnerable people. Ashley's case highlights critical issues that we can no longer ignore. The fact that a man with multiple domestic violence convictions could continue to terrorize intimate partners. The reality that specific, public death threats can go unheeded. The way childhood trauma can make people vulnerable to the very patterns they're trying to escape. Domestic violence organizations across the country are already using Ashley's story to educate people about warning signs. Her Facebook post, "Those desperate words about being threatened with a gun," has become a teaching tool for recognizing when someone is in immediate danger. Mental health professionals are pointing to Ashley's case as an example of how childhood trauma affects adult relationships. Her story illustrates why survivors of violence need specialized support and resources, not just to heal from their past, but to recognize and avoid dangerous situations in the future. Perhaps most importantly, Ashley's story is forcing uncomfortable conversations about community responsibility. Her public cry for help on social media raises questions we all need to answer. What do we do when we see signs of abuse? How do we respond when someone posts about being threatened? What's our role in protecting the vulnerable people in our communities? Ashley's neighbor from her childhood, Karen Diaz, captured this perfectly when she said, The biggest thing is to be heard and to be believed, and they just don't want to bother with that, and this happens all the time. Ashley's legacy should be a commitment to do better, to create systems that intervene before violence escalates, to develop technologies that can identify genuine cries for help on social media, to ensure that domestic violence convictions carry real consequences and monitoring. Her story should remind us that domestic violence isn't just a private matter between intimate partners, it's a community issue that affects children, families, neighborhoods, and society as a whole. Most of all, Ashley's legacy should be remembered as one of incredible strength. She survived childhood trauma that would have broken many people. She built a loving relationship with her children. She fought to break cycles of violence and create a better life for her family. The fact that she ultimately fell victim to the same pattern of violence that killed her mother doesn't diminish her strength, it highlights how much more work we need to do to protect people like Ashley. Ashley Morris was more than a victim. She was a survivor, a mother, a woman who tried to warn others about the danger she was facing. She deserved to live. She deserved to see her sons grow up. She deserved to break the cycle of violence that had haunted her family. We couldn't save Ashley, but if we learn from her story, if we demand better from our systems, if we commit to recognizing and responding to the warning signs she showed us, maybe we can save the next Ashley Morris. The story of Ashley Michelle Morris isn't just another true crime case to discuss and forget. It's a mirror held up to our society, reflecting back our failures and challenging us to do better. It's a call to action that we can't afford to ignore. Right now, as you're watching this video, there's another Ashley out there. Another woman posting desperate pleas on social media. Another person documenting threats of violence, expressing fear for their life, worrying about leaving their children motherless. The question is, what are we going to do about it? If you see warning signs, and now you know what they look like, don't scroll past. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Ashley's Facebook post was seen by people who cared about her, but somehow it still went unanswered. We can't let that happen again. Screenshot the post. Call the police. Reach out directly to the person. Connect them with domestic violence resources. Do something. Because doing nothing isn't neutral, it's complicity. But individual action isn't enough. We need to demand more from our systems. Contact your representatives about domestic violence legislation. Support organizations that help survivors. Advocate for better monitoring of repeat offenders like Lawrence Moore. Push for technology solutions that can identify genuine cries for help on social media platforms. Ashley Morris survived being stabbed 14 times when she was 10 years old. She carried scars, both physical and emotional, for the rest of her life. But she also carried incredible strength, resilience, and love for her children. She tried to warn us. In her final Facebook post, she told us exactly what was going to happen. She documented the threats, described the weapons, expressed her fears. She did everything she could to save herself and protect her sons. Ashley got tattoos that told her story, survivor, on her hand, her mother's name on her shoulder. She stayed in Toledo to be close to where her mother was buried. She raised her boys with love and told them stories about the grandmother they would never meet but who would have loved them deeply. She was more than the violence that shaped her childhood and claimed her life. She was a daughter, a mother, a survivor, a woman who deserved so much better than the hand she was dealt. The cycle of violence that killed Vivian Morris in 1998 and Ashley Morris in 2025 doesn't have to continue. DeAndre and D'Angelo don't have to carry this trauma into their adult lives. Other children don't have to witness their mother's murders. But breaking these cycles requires all of us. It requires communities that believe survivors and respond to their cries for help. It requires systems that prioritize prevention over reaction. It requires a society that treats domestic violence as the public health crisis it truly is. Ashley's story ends here, but the fight against domestic violence continues. And that fight needs you. If this case has impacted you, if Ashley's story has opened your eyes to warning signs you might have missed before, then please hit that subscribe button and share this video. Your engagement helps these important stories reach more people, and awareness saves lives. Let me know in the comments what case you'd like me to cover next, but more importantly, tell me what you're going to do differently now that you know Ashley's story. How will you recognize the warning signs? How will you respond when someone reaches out for help? Because ultimately, that's how we honor Ashley Morris. Not just by remembering her story, but by making sure her death means something. By ensuring that the next woman who posts a desperate plea for help on social media doesn't go unheard. Ashley tried to save herself. She couldn't. But maybe, if we listen to what she tried to tell us, we can save someone else. Rest in peace, Ashley Michelle Morris. Your story will not be forgotten.